A good day, Coach Jude. I'm Emmy Ann Francisco from BTLET Industrial Arts. My role in this video is to discuss about the psychoanalytic and the psychosexual theory of Sigmund Freud and the cognitive theory of Jean Piaget. According to Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory, personality develops through a series of stages, each characterized by a certain internal psychological conflict. Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality argues that the human behavior is the result of the interaction among three component parts of the mind, the ID, ego, and superego. This structural theory of personality places great importance on how conflicts among the parts of the mind shape behavior and personality. These conflicts are mostly unconscious. According to Freud, personality develops during childhood and is critically shaped through a series of 5 psychosexual theories of development. During each stage, a child is presented with a conflict between biological drives and social expectations. Successful navigation of these internal conflicts will lead to mastery of each developmental stage and ultimately to a fully mature personality. Freud's ideas have since been met with criticism, in part because of his singular focus on sexuality as the main driver of human personality development. Freud's structure of human mind. First is the ID. The ID is the most primitive of the three structures. Is concerned with the instant gratifications of basic physical needs and urges. Second is the superego. Is concerned with the social rules and morals, similar to what many people call their conscience or their moral compass. Lastly is the ego. In instant to the instinctual ID and this moral superego, the ego is the rational, pragmatic part of our personality. So now, let's proceed to the psychosexual theory. Freud believed that personality developed through a series of childhood stages, in which the pleasure-seeking energies of ID become focused on certain erogenous areas. The psychosexual energy or libido was described as the driving force behind behavior. According to the famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, children go through a series of psychosexual stages that lead to the development of the adult personality. His theory described how personality develops over the course of childhood. So now, I will give you the Freud psychosexual stages. First, oral stage. Birth to 1 year erogenous zone or mouth. Second, anal stage. 1 to 3 year erogenous zone or bowel and bladder control. Third, the phallic stage. 3 to 6 year erogenous zone or genitals. Next, latent stage. 6 to puberty libido inactive. Lastly, the genital stage, puberty to death maturing sexual interest. So now, let's proceed to the cognitive theory of Jean Piaget. Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development suggests that children move through 4 different stages of mental development. His theory focuses not only on understanding how children acquire knowledge, but also on understanding to the nature of intelligence. So here's Piaget's stages are: first, sensory motor stage, birth to 2 years. Second, pre-operational stage, ages 2 to 7. Concrete operational stage, ages 7 to 11. Next, formal operational stage, ages 12 and up. Piaget believed that children take an active role in the learning process, acting like little scientists as they perform experiments, make observations, and learn about the world. As kids interact with the world around them, They continually add new knowledge and adapt previously held ideas to accommodate new information. So now, I will discuss the stages of Jean Piaget. First, the sensory motor stage. Ages birth to 2 years. The infant knows the world through their movements and sensations. Children learn about the world through basic actions such as sucking, grasping, looking, and listening. Second is the pre-operational stage, ages 2 to 7 years. Children begin to think symbolically and learn to use words and pictures to represent objects. Next is the concrete operational stage, ages 7 to 11 years. During this stage, children begin to thinking logically about concrete events. Lastly is the formal operational stage, ages 12 and up. At this stage, teens begin to think more about moral, philosophical, ethical, social, and political issues that require theoretical and abstract reason.
Good day everyone, and especially to you, Coach Jude. I am Christian de los Santos from 1D BTLET IA. My role in this video is to discuss the psychosocial theory of development by Erik Erikson and sociocultural theory by Lev Vygotsky. So first, I will discuss the psychosocial theory of development by Erik Erikson. Erik Erikson was an ego-psychologist who developed one of the most popular and influential theories of development. Erikson's theory described the impact of social experience across the whole lifespan. Erikson was interested in how social interactions and relationships played a role in the development and growth of human beings. In Erikson's views, these conflicts are centered on either developing a psychological quality or failing to develop that quality. During these times, the potential for personal growth is high, but so is the potential for failure. If people successfully deal with the conflict, they emerge from the stage with psychological strengths that will serve them well for the rest of their lives. If they fail to deal effectively with these conflicts, they may not develop the essential skills needed for a strong sense of self. Erikson also believed that sense of competence motivates behavior and actions. Each stage in Erikson's theories is concerned with becoming competent in an area of life. So, there are 8 stages of psychosocial development by Erik Erikson. Number 1. Infancy. Conflict between trust and mistrust. The first stage of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development occurs between birth to 18 months of age and is the most fundamental stage in life because an infant is utterly dependent. Developing trust is based on the dependability and quality of the child caregivers. During the first stage of psychosocial development, children develop a sense of trust when caregivers provide reliability, care, and affection. A lack of this leads to mistrust. Stage 2. Early childhood or conflict between autonomy versus shame or doubt. The second stage of Erikson's theory of psychosocial development takes place during early childhood and focuses on children's developing a greater sense of personal control. At this point of development, children are just starting to gain a little independence. They are starting to perform basic actions on their own and making simple decisions about what they prefer. By allowing kids to make choices and gain control, parents and caregivers can help children develop a sense of autonomy. Stage 3. The preschool. Conflict between initiative versus guilt. The third stage of psychosocial development takes place during the preschool years. At this point in psychosocial development, children begin to assert their power and control over the world through directing play and other social interactions. Children who are successfully at this stage will feel capable and able to lead others. Those who fail to acquire these skills are left with a sense of guilt, self-doubt, and lack of initiatives. When the ideal balance of individual initiatives and a willingness to work with others is achieved, the ego quality known as the purpose emerges. So the stage 4 is school age, the conflict between industry versus inferiority. The fourth psychosocial stage takes place during the early school years from approximately age of 5 to 11. Through social interactions, children begin to develop a sense of pride in their accomplishments and abilities. Children need to cope with new social and academic demands. Success leads to a sense of competence, while failure results in feeling of inferiority. Successfully finding a balance at this stage of psychosocial development leads to the strength known as competence, in which children develop a belief in their abilities to handle the tasks set before them. The stage 5 is the adolescence, the conflict between identity versus role confusion. Fifth psychosocial stage takes place during the often turbulent teenage years. This stage plays an essential role in developing a sense of personal identity, which will continue to influence behavior and development for the rest of a person's life. Teenage need to develop a sense of self and personal identity. Success leads to an ability to stay true to yourself, while failure leads to the role of confusion and a weak sense of self. Our personal identity gives each of us an integrated and cohesive sense of selves that endures through our lives. Our sense of personal identity is shaped by our experience and interactions with others, and it is this identity that helps guide our actions, beliefs, and behaviors as we age. The stage 6 is young adulthood, the conflict between intimacy versus isolation. Young adults need to form intimate and loving relationship with other people. Success leads to a strong relationship while the failure results in a loneliness and isolation. This stage covers the periods of early adulthood when people are exploring personal relationship. Erikson believed it was vital that people develop close and committed relationships with other people. Those who are successful at this step will form relationships that are enduring and secure. Successful resolutions of this stage results in a virtue known as love. It's marked by the ability to form lasting and meaningful relationships with other people. The stage 7 is the middle adulthood, the conflict between generativity and stagnation. Adults need to create or nurture things that will outlast them, often by having children or creating a positive change that benefits other people. Success leads to a feeling of usefulness and accomplishment, while a failure results in a shallow involvement in the world. During adulthood, we continue to build our lives, focusing on our career and in our family. Those who are successful during this phase will feel that they are contributing to the world by being active in their home and community. Those who fail to attain these skills will feel unproductive and uninvolved in the world. Care is a virtue achieved when this stage is handled carefully. Being proud of your accomplishments, watching your children grow in adults, and developing a sense of unity with your life partner are important accomplishments of this stage. Stage 8. Maturity, or the conflict between ego integrity versus despair. The final psychosocial stage occurs during old age, and it focuses on reflecting back on life. At this point in development, people look back on the events of their lives and determine if they are happy with the life that they live or if they regret the things they did or did not do. At this stage, people reflect back on the events of their lives and take stock. Those who look back on the life they feel was well lived will feel satisfied and ready to face the end of their lives with a sense of peace. Those who look back on and only feel regret will instead feel fearful that their lives will end without accomplishing the things they feel they should have. Those who are unsuccessful during this stage will feel that their life has been wasted and may experience many regrets. The person will be left with feelings of bitterness and despair. Those who feel proud of their accomplishment will feel a sense of integrity. Successfully completing this phase means looking back with few regrets and a general feelings of satisfaction. These individuals will attain wisdom even when confronting death. So the second topic that I will discuss is the sociocultural theory by Lev Vygotsky. Vygotsky's sociocultural theories views human development as a socially mediated process in which children acquire their cultural values, beliefs, and problem-solving strategies through collaborative dialogues with more knowledgeable members of society. Vygotsky's theories is comprised of concepts such as culture-specific tools, private speech, and the zone of proximal development. Vygotsky assumed cognitive development varies across cultures, whereas Piaget stated cognitive development is mostly universal across cultures. Vygotsky stated the importance of cultural and social context for learning. Cognitive development stems for social interactions from guided learning within the zone of proximal development as children and their partners construct knowledge. For Vygotsky, the environment in which children grow up will influence how they think and what they think about. For Vygotsky, thought and language are initially separate systems from the beginning of life, merging at 3 years of age, producing verbal thought. For Vygotsky, cognitive development results from an internalization of language. Adults transmit their culture's tools of intellectual adaptations that children internalize. Vygotsky claimed that infants are born with the basic abilities for intellectual development called elementary mental functions. Tools of intellectual adaptation is Vygotsky's term for methods of thinking and problem-solving strategies that children internalize through social interactions with the more knowledgeable members of society. In order to gain an understanding of Vygotsky's theory of cognitive development, one must understand two of the main principles of Vygotsky's work: the more knowledgeable others or MKO and the zone of proximal development or CPD. The more knowledgeable others or MKO is somewhat self-explanatory. It refers to someone who has a better understanding or a higher ability level than the learner with respect to a particular task, process, or concept. Zone of proximal development, the concept of more knowledgeable other is integrally related to the second important principles of Vygotsky's work, the zone of proximal development. This is an important concept that relates to the difference between what a child can achieve independently and what a child can achieve with guidance and encouragement from the skilled partner. Because he believed that language develops from social interactions for communication purposes. Because he viewed language as man's greatest tool, a means of communicating with the outside world. According to Vygotsky, language plays two critical roles in cognitive development. First, it is the main means by which adults transmit information to children. Second, language itself becomes a very powerful tool of intellectual adaptation. For Vygotsky, thought and language are initially separate systems from beginning of life, merging at around 3 years of age. At this point, speech, thought become independent, thought become a verbal, speech become representational. When this happens, children's monologues internalize to become inner speech. The internalizations of language is important as it drives cognitive development. Vygotsky was the first psychologist to document the importance of private speech. He considered private speech as the transition point between social and inner speech, the moment in development where language and thought unite to constitute verbal thinking. Vygotsky viewed private speech as a revolution in development which is triggered when pre-verbal thought and pre-intellectual language come together to create fundamentally new forms of mental functioning. Vygotski's approach to child development is a form of social constructivism based on the idea that cognitive functions are the products of social interactions. Vygotsky emphasized the collaborative natures of learning by the constructions of knowledge through social negotiation. Every function in child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level, first between people and then inside the child. This applies equally to voluntary attentions, to locally memory and the formations of concepts. All the higher functions originate as actual relationships between individuals. The main criticism of Vygotski's work concerns the assumptions that is relevant to all cultures.
My name is Seto from 1 Degree of Major in Industrial Arts, and I am from Study Hub 7. So, for this video, I will discuss the ecological theory by Brainy Badgers and the classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov. So, Badgers' ecological systems theory views child development as a complex system of relationships affected by multiple levels of surrounding environment from immediate settings of family and school to broad cultural values, laws, and customs. To study a child's development, then we must look not only at the child and her immediate environment but also at the interaction of the larger environment as well. Brainy Badgers' ecological system theory has implications for educational practice. He recognized there are multiple aspects of a developing child's life that interacts with and affects the child. His work looked beyond individual development, taking into account wider and influencing factors in the context or ecology of development. He proposed the ecological systems theory based on these dynamic interactions that the environments have on the developing child. So the five ecological systems, Brunner, 1977, suggested that the environment of the child is a nested arrangement of structures, each contained within the next. He organized them in order of how much of an impact they have on a child. He named these structures the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, macrosystem, and the chronosystem. Because the five systems are interrelated, the influence of one system on a child's development depends on its relationships with the others. The microsystem is the first of Brunner's theory and are the things that have direct contact with the child in their immediate environment, such as parents, siblings, teachers, and school peers. Relationships in a microsystem are bidirectional, meaning the child can be influenced by other people in their environment and is also capable of changing the beliefs and actions of other people too. Furthermore, the reactions of the child to individuals in their microsystem can influence how they treat them in return. The interactions within microsystems are often very personal and are crucial for fostering and supporting the child's development. If a child has a strong nurturing relationship with their parents, this is said to have a positive effect on the child. Whereas distant and unaffections, a parents will have a negative effect on the child. So the next, the mesosystem. So the mesosystem interactions between the child's microsystems, such as the interactions between the child's parents and teachers, or between school peers and siblings. So the next is the mesosystem. The mesosystem encompasses the interactions between the child's microsystem, such as the interactions between the child's parents and teachers, or between school peers and siblings. So, and the next is mesosystem, is where a person's individual microsystems do not function independently but are interconnected and exerted influence upon one another. For instance, if a child's parents communicate with the child's teachers, these interactions may influence the child's development. Essentially, a mesosystem is a system of microsystems. According to the ecological systems theory, if the child's parents and teachers get along and have a good relationship, this should have positive effects on the child's development, compared to negative effects on development if the teachers and parents do not get along. And the next is the exosystem. The exosystem is a component of the ecological system theory developed by Yuri Brunner in the 1970s. It incorporated other formal and informal social structures which do not themselves contain the child but indirectly influence them as they affect one of the microsystems. For examples, exosystems include the neighborhood, parents, workplace, parents' friends, and the mass media. These are the environment which the child is not involved and are external to their experience, but nonetheless affects them anyway. An instance of ecosystem affecting the child's development could be if one of the parents had a dispute with their boss at work. The parents may come and have a short temper with the child as a result of something which happened in the workplace, resulting in a negative effect on development. And the next is macro system. A macro system is a component of Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory that focuses on how cultural elements affect a child's development, such as socioeconomic status, wealth, poverty, and ethnicity. Thus, culture that individuals are immersed within may influence their beliefs and perceptions about the events that transpire in life. So the macro system differs from the previous ecosystem as it does not refer to the specific environment of one developing child, but the already established society and culture which the child is developing in. This can also include the socio-economic status, ethnicity, geographic location, and ideologies of the culture. For example, a child living in a third world country would experience a different development than a child living in a wealthier country. So the chrono system. The fifth and final level of Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory is known as the chrono system. This system consists of all of the environmental changes that occur over the lifetime which influence development, including major life transitions and historical events. This can include normal life transitions such as starting school, but can also include non-normative life transitions such as parents getting a divorce or having to move to a new house. That's it for ecological theory. And the next is the classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov. Like many great scientific advances, Pavlovian conditioning, or aka classical conditioning, was discovered accidentally. Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, 1849 to 1936, was a physiologist, not a psychologist. During the 1890s, Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov was researching about salivation in dogs in response to being fed. He inserted a small test tube in the cheek of each dog to measure saliva when the dogs were fed. With a powder made from meat, Pavlov predicted the dogs would salivate in response to the food placed in front of them. But he noticed that his dogs would begin to salivate whenever they heard the footsteps of his assistant who was bringing them the food. When Pavlov discovered that any object or event which the dogs learned to associate with food, such as the lab assistant, would trigger the same response, he realized that he had made an important scientific discovery. Accordingly, he devoted the rest of his career to studying this type of learning. The neutral stimulus has become associated with the unconditioned stimulus. It becomes a conditioned stimulus, or CS. The conditioned response, or CR, is the response to the conditioned stimulus. Classical conditioning is learning through association and was first demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov showed that dogs could be conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell if that sound was repeatedly presented at the same time that they were given food. First, the dogs were presented with the food they salivated. The food was the unconditioned stimulus and salivation was an unconditioned or innate response. Then, Pavlov sounded the bell neutral stimulus before giving the food. After a few fair rings, the dogs salivated when they heard the bell even when no food was given. The bell had become the conditioned stimulus and salivation had become the conditioned response. So the dogs had learned to associate the bell with the food and the sound of the bell and salivation was triggered by the sound of the bell. So Pavlov showed that classical conditioning leads to learning by association. And that's it for classical conditioning. And that's it for topic 5 and 6. Up next, that's topic 7 and 8. Thank you for watching.
A blessed day everyone, especially to Coach Jude. Now I will discuss about learning principle number 7 and 8. So first, I will discuss about learning principle number 7, operant conditioning by B.F. Skinner. Operant conditioning is also known as instrumental conditioning. Is a method of learning, normally attributed to B.F. Skinner, where the consequence of a response determine the probability of being repeated. Through operant conditioning, behavior which is reinforced, rewarded, will likely be repeated, and behavior which is punishment will occur less frequently. Skinner identified 3 types of responses or operand that can follow behavior. First, neutral operand, responses from the environment that either increase nor decrease the probability of a behavior being repeated. Second, reinforcer, response from the environment that increase the probability of a behavior being repeated. Reinforcer can be either positive or negative. And the third, punisher, responses from the environment that decrease the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. Punishment weakens behavior. We can all think of example of how our own behavior has been affected by reinforcer and punisher. As a child, you probably tried out a number of behavior and learned from their consequence. For example, if when you were younger, you tried smoking at school, and the chief consequence was that you got in with the crowd you always wanted to hang out with, you would have been positively reinforced, rewarded, and would be likely to repeat the behavior. Principle number 8. Multiple intelligence theory by Howard Gardner. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence proposes that people are not born with all of the intelligence they will ever have. This theory challenges the traditional notion that there is one single type of intelligence, sometimes known as G for general intelligence, that only focuses on cognitive abilities. Theory of multiple intelligence was first proposed by Howard Gardner in his 1983 book Frame of Mind, where he broadened the definition of intelligence and outlines several distinct types of intellectual competencies. garnered development a series of 8 inclusion criteria while evaluating each candidate's intelligence that was based on a variety of scientific disciplines. That's all my discussion. Thank you.
Good day coach, good day classmates. So today's video I will discuss the learning principle of number 9 and number 10. So the learning principle number 9 is metacognition theory by John Flavel. So what is metacognition theory? Cognition theory means thinking about thinking. The concept was created by John Flavel in the 1970s. It is include all the process involved in regulating how we think. Examples include planning out our work, tracking our progress, and assessing our own knowledge. Metacognition strategies are useful to help us study smarter, not harder, and achieve self-control. Metacognition is an awareness of one's own thought, processes, and understanding of the patterns behind terms. The terms comes from the root word meta, meaning beyond or on top of. Metacognition can take many forms, just as reflecting on one's ways of thinking and knowing when how to use particularly strategies for problem solving. There are generally two components of metacognition. Number 1, knowledge about cognition, and number 2, regulations of cognition. Metacognition also involves thinking about one's own thinking process, such as study skills, memory capabilities, and the ability to monitor learning. This concept needs to be explicitly taught along with content instruction. Metacognitive knowledge is about one's own cognitive process and the understanding of how to regulate those processes to maximize learning. Metacognition strategies can be divided into 3 stages, which are planning, monitoring, and reviewing. Planning refers to the appropriate selections of strategies and the correct allocations of resources that affect task performance. Monitoring refers to one's awareness of comprehension and task performance. So, evaluating or reviewing refers to appraising the final product of a task and the efficiency at which the task was performed. This can include re-evaluating strategies that were we used. And that's all for the metacognition. Thank you. Number 10, learning principles. Law of Learning by Edward Thorndike. Edward Thorndike developed the first 3 laws of learning, which are readiness, exercise, and effect. Since Thorndike set down his basic 3 laws in the early part of the 20th century, 5 additional principles have been added: primary, recency, intensity, freedom, and requirements. So readiness. Readiness implies a degree of concentration and eagerness. Individuals learn best when they are physical, mental, and emotional ready to learn, and do not learn well if they see no reason for learning. Exercise. The principle of exercise states that those things most often repeated are best remembered. It is the basis of drill and practices. It has been proven that students learn best and retain information longer when they have meaningful practice and repetition. And the last one is effect. The principle of effect is based on the emotional reaction of the students. It has a direct relationship to motivation. The principles of effect is that learning is strengthened when accompanied by a pleasant or is satisfying feeling, and that learning is weakened when associated with an unpleasant feeling. Educational implications. The teacher should arouse curiosity for learning so that the pupil feels ready to imbibe the new experience. The teacher should, before taking up the new lesson, arouse the interest and desire of the students to learn.